Hey, I'm John, the modern old school developer. This is my story and why I made this channel. I've been programming for over 25 years on all kinds of platforms. The Apple II, DOS, Windows, Linux, Mac OS, even Texas Instruments graphing calculators. I've worked with basic C and C++, Java, Perl, PHP, Python, JavaScript, TypeScript, and multiple flavors of assembly. Ever since Linux came around, I've desired cross-platform software. I want the things that I use, and especially the things I build, to work, no matter what I'm using at the time, be that Windows, Linux, or Mac OS. Hey, if it can work on my phone too, then it should. Cross-platform wasn't easy in the early days. Even software for Unix rarely worked across the different flavors. Java was the first thing I found that really did cross-platform, and it was glorious. You could really write software that would run anywhere, but Java runtimes were large, and the internet was slow. Asking people to download a Java runtime for your software was often asking too much. Now, enterprise software is dominated by Java today, but the write once, run anywhere mantra it was sold on never really caught on. I ditched Java for C++ and WX widgets. You could embed the platform libraries in the executable, and no one had to download and install a Java runtime. You could even compress the binary to reduce file size for slower connections. I stayed with this for a few years before Qt dropped the licensing requirement for developing Windows software. Now, I've always liked C++, but it's not the easiest language to develop with. And my C++ usage long predates smart pointers and widespread adoption of RAII. If you've never looked at C++ because you thought it would be a nightmare of manual memory management, you should take another look. They've come a long way in addressing the difficulties involved. And if you're developing native desktop applications, C++ is still the go-to binding. You might find a Python wrapper, but you probably won't find one for Golang or Rust or any other modern language that provides memory safety and speed. But the holy grail of cross-platform development has long been the web browser. Just stuff the application into a web browser and it instantly runs on all platforms. Of course, my web dev skills came up in the late 90s. At that time, you might still find CGI scripts written in C before Perl took over that space, later to be replaced by PHP and Ruby. If you wanted interactivity, you probably turned to Java or Flash back when browser plugins for those things still existed. JavaScript was used to annoy people with pop-ups, so it was often turned off. Not that it mattered, because it didn't work the same between browsers anyway. Not that anything did. Microsoft and Netscape competed to introduce new features, and although there were web standards bodies, they mostly just ratified whatever was being done that was popular or useful. The linters, formatters, transpilers, and other tools we take for granted today to help us write correct code either didn't exist or were extremely primitive. Browsers would try to guess at the developer's meaning, and this was a disaster for compatibility. Eventually, it was clear that Microsoft had won, and testing was limited to Internet Explorer. If it worked there, it was good enough. Things have come a long way. Web standards are the norm, and compatibility between browsers is remarkably high. Although Google is now king of the browser market and apps are only tested on Chrome, things will usually work well enough on Firefox and Safari too, with only minor, if any, tweaks needed. CSS has evolved considerably. Evolving past its original purpose of styling HTML, it can now handle the entire layout. People went from using HTML table-based layouts to CSS floats, which were marginally better, but far more complicated. Now, browser apps are nice, but they have a lot of limitations. For security, browsers prevent the user from interacting with the underlying platform. This means applications cannot open a file on the disk or save one, and they really don't look native to the platform either. They don't have their own menu bars, toolbars, status bars, or any of the other common desktop metaphors. The native look doesn't bother me as much as it does some people, but it's a concern. Now, I saw the advent of CSS Flexbox and Grid and how they solve the layout issues as good as anything I've ever seen in Java, WX Widgets, or Qt. I saw the rise of Electron for making native desktop applications. But by this time, my skills were rusty, out of date, and practically irrelevant. I had mostly stopped writing desktop applications. I wrote a couple of small web apps with vanilla JavaScript and jQuery, but that was it. I was working on a small web app at work. I had been using Flask with server-side rendered templates. This was conceptually similar to how I used to work with Perl or PHP, only using Python instead, which by that time had become my favorite language. And that was when my wake-up call came. I was told that we would be standardizing on React for front-ends. I didn't even know what React was. I thought it was a CSS framework. I had tried to watch some tutorials on it at some point, but the web app development process seemed so complicated now and so far removed from anything that I understood, I just gave up. It wasn't relevant to me at the time anyway. Damn kids and their stupid tool chains. In my day, you sat down and you programmed. You didn't have to build an entire development environment first with 80 or 1,000 dependencies. But times and technologies change. Things come and go. The developer who doesn't keep learning and updating their skills is doomed to irrelevance. And I was determined that wasn't going to be me. I'm not going to be the gray beard in the office whining about how simple the 70s were. If React is the future, I better learn React. And I'm very glad I did, because it's led me incredibly close to my own holy grail of cross-platform development. Web apps with React and desktop apps with Electron. It's not perfect, but it's close, and far closer than I ever could have gotten in 2002 when I first started building cross-platform applications. So that's my story, but why did I make this channel? Well, first, I wanted to show people how to build applications with modern web technologies. I watched a lot of YouTube tutorials while learning React, and one thing I thought was missing was actual app development. People demonstrate concepts, not programs. They write demos, not apps. This is understandable because polishing an application to a decent level takes time, but tutorial videos sometimes fall short because it can be hard to see how all the pieces fit together. So I'm making this channel to show my software development process. I'll demonstrate that by rewriting some of my old software from the 2000s. I don't want any of these things to stop working, and now that I can actually use the front-end technology I've wanted for 20 years, I thought I'd show how in case it's helpful to anyone else. And it couldn't hurt to shore up my own skills as well. Gotta stave off irrelevance after all. So I hope that tells you a little bit about who I am and why this channel exists. If you want to watch someone build actual applications with modern web technologies, then hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next episode. I'm John, the modern old school developer. Thanks for watching.